Marami sa atin ang nagpaloko, kaya't kung nais mo na ang pagbabago, simulan mo na sa iyong sarili mismo.
Kaya't ngayong darating na pilian, mag-isip ng di na malinlang. Kalayaan sa pagboto ay panindigan.
Kinabukasan natin ang nakasalalay dyan.
Ituloy ang pagbabago, ikaw ang takbo ang tanging susi nito. Ituloy ang pagbabago, pag-asayang naman ang mundo. Sa tulong ng ating pagkakaisa, ang nasang pag-ulay sigurad na magagawa. Kaya't kung nais mo ng pagbabago, simulan mo na sa iyong sarili mismo. Kaya't ngayong darating na pilian, mag-isip lang di na malinlang. Kalayaan sa pagboto ay panindigan.
Kinabukasan natin ang nakasalalay dyan.
Ituloy ang pagbabago, ikaw ang takbo ang tanging susi nito. Ituloy ang pagbabago, pag-asayang naman ang mundo.
Ituloy ang pagbabago, ituloy ang pagbabago. Pagpili ang iyong boto sa halagang 500 piso. Katupasan ba ng ilang sentimo ang digdigan mo? Politikong taliwas, kaban ng bayan na iwawadas. Kaya't maging mapanuri sa was mong pagpili. Huwag sayangin ang ita sa daliri. Maging responsable sa pagpili, magkaisa at magtulungan.
Kakayahan mong magpasyang magiging gabay sa pag-asenso ng bansa sa'yo magsisimula. Ituloy ang pagbabago, ikaw ang takbo ang susi nito. Ituloy ang pagbabago, pag-asayang naman ang mundo.
Ituloy ang pagbabago, huwag ipagpili ang iyong boto. Ituloy ang pagbabago.
We don't need to explain because truth needs no justification. We are not afraid because the truth will always win. When we ask questions, it's always for the good of all. We question to build, not to break. We question to clarify, not to confuse. We question to protect, not hurt. Truth hurts, but it heals. Tune in to SMNI, where truth is free. SMNI, defining true press freedom.
Pagod ka na ba? Pahinga ka muna. Sige lang, hinga lang ng malalim. Palipasin muna ang dilim. Mag-ipon ka muna ng lakas. Dahil sasabak ka na naman bukas, ituloy mo lang ang laban. Kahit dahan-dahan, ituloy.
Nagbabalik po ang The Deep Probe, the Smni Presidential Candidates Interview. We're down to our last candidate. Ito na po ang huling kandidato na haharap sa ating panelists sa araw na ito.
Sa gitna ng samot-saring isyong ibinabato laban sa kanyang pamilya, nananatiling matibay at may paninindigan para sa bayan. Bit-bit ang mga pangakong pagbabago para sa ikabuunlad ng bansa. Trabaho para sa mga Pilipino, murang kuryente, industrialisasyon, kalidad na edukasyon, reforma sa iba't ibang sektor, at pagkakaisa ng sambayanang Pilipino ang sentro ng kanyang kampanya.
Bilang Pangulo ng Republika ng Pilipinas, sinabi ko na ako'y tatakbo dahil ang aking layunin, ang aking dating bansa ay pagkaisa muli ang sambayanang Pilipino. Pagandahin po natin ang ating minamahal na bansang Pilipinas. Sama-sama po tayong babangon muli.
Tumatakbong Pangulo mula sa Partido Federal ng Pilipinas, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr.
You may now sit down, Senator Marcos.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
May we request the audience to please sit down so we can start the program.
I brought all my relatives.
Everyone, we ask everyone to please sit down so we can start the program. Okay. Thank you for your cooperation. Thank you. Okay. Senator Marcos, you have the floor and the panelists will be asking you questions.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Marcos.
Good meeting you, ma'am.
if this were, I've never been to a campaign rally, but if this looks like it, and maybe multiplied so many times over, I can imagine what they're feeling is like euphoria, isn't it? Because we're not even involved and we're feeling euphoric here.
It's very encouraging, ma'am. That's true.
Okay, this is the second time we are going through this, but this time it will be banter. Nothing aggressive nor belligerent. You have the thickest portfolio here. I counted more than 50 pages which were submitted to the network and which were given to us.
Madaming,
So,
madaming
like I have
trabaho, ma'am.
1,000 questions, but since I have 3 other colleagues here, maybe I'll ask something which is right in my alley. And I think I have asked this also in my post in the social media. And post-Ukraine, assuming that you have a peace agreement within the next 2 weeks, which is more likely, do you see a new political and economic order, but this time you have other political actors like Moscow, Beijing, and even Tehran?
Yes.
What's your take on that?
There will be a new world order. Because I think watching Ukraine and seeing the developments, and which are not exactly going the way of that the President Putin would have wanted it to. I suspect there will be domestic implications to whatever the peace agreement is going to be. I hope you're right, ma'am, that it will be done in 2 weeks because we are the entire world is suffering. But there will be a very big change because the how do you say the idea. I think some of the analysts have said, I don't know if you agree with this, is that President Putin is trying to reconstruct or recreate the Soviet Union under another name. So perhaps this was his move. Should he weaken as a political figure in his own country, in Russia, then certainly the policy, that policy of trying to gain territory through whatever means, as he says, because to provide for him a buffer to NATO, whatever the reason might truly be. I think that will have to be re-studied by whoever will be most dominant in Russian domestic politics after Putin. So yes, I believe there will be a new world order, and I think I am certain that Tehran and Beijing are watching very, very closely what will happen to Ukraine. There will be a geopolitical balance of power. It also depends on what the reaction of the EU and the United States will be. I think the United States we can predict fairly accurately. EU is in a more difficult spot simply because they are highly dependent for their energy to Russia, and how they will balance that. I know that the President Biden has just signed with the EU a deal to supply from the United States and from other countries 15 billion tons of gas, which will cover some of the needs of the EU. But again, that's not something that can instantly be made, to instantly be applied. There will be a transition period because it is a very large economic infrastructure that has been developed for Europe to take advantage of the gas supplies out of Russia. These are all terribly large forces, and inevitably it will change things.
Yeah, well, it seems like you have a more dire scenario, future scenario in mind. But what I have used really is from a content analytical perspective, using events data analysis, meaning I'm paying attention to the verbs being used by the negotiators. And this is not Pollyannish, by the way, Mr. Marcos. It's just that I feel that Putin will not allow the conflict to spill over. It will encapsulate within the Ukraine conflict area. And that, yes, I still believe that within the next 2 weeks, you have a peace agreement.
I sincerely hope so. Because misunderstandings, mistakes can occur. With Poland being right there on the border of Ukraine, we already have had reports of missiles that mistakenly flew into Poland. And these are the kind of things that we have to be very careful about. I think maybe that is one thing that they can agree upon, Russia and the West, as we have referred to it often.
Mr. Marcos, earlier, I don't know if you were around already when I asked questions about the projected state visit of Vladimir Putin here in the Philippines. Because the Duterte administration has only so many more breaths to take before the end of their regime, of their tenure. When you become president, will he honor that invitation that Duterte had given to him to do a
Certainly.
state visit?
Oh,
Not
well,
just a visit, a
must-
state visit.
Well, certainly. Why not? We have diplomatic relations with Moscow. We should continue to honor that agreement that we have with Russia, and we must continue to again cultivate the relationships that are beneficial to the country. And it's not, as long as we make our position very clear that self-determination is an important principle as far as the Philippines is concerned, and in that context, then we can still speak on many other subjects with Russia.
Yeah, so that means you are not telegraphing something to the United States of America by welcoming Vladimir Putin in the state visit.
It need not be Russia or Vladimir Putin, any country. I think that would like to come and visit and would feel that there is something beneficial to be gained by furthering, strengthening relationships between our two countries is something that we should always be open to.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. Marcos.
Good evening.
Ang tanong ko po ay ito, ang nabanggit niyo po ang phrase na New World Order na sa tingin niyo ay maaaring mangyari pagkatapos ng peace treaty between Ukraine and Russia. And you see that the world will be restructured around a new framework or a new geopolitical order. So my question is this, I hope that you realize the burden or the special task that you have as a future chief architect of our foreign policy. Because in the past drawing of world orders, the Philippines never played a role in determining its position in that world order. For example, between the wars of Spain and the United States, it's the United States that defined our position in that new world order. When the United Nations was instituted after post-World War II, we were still at the coattails of the United States. But now we are an independent country. So my question is, when this new world order that you think could happen after a peace treaty gets concluded between Ukraine and Russia, how will you position our country in this new geopolitical order?
It very clearly will depend on what the exit strategy will be for the West, for EU, and for Putin in the peace agreement that we hope they will sign. What the nature of that agreement will be? Will it be status quo? The forces that are in Ukraine, the Russian forces and Belarusian forces that are already in Ukraine, will they just stay where they are, status quo? Will they be told to withdraw? I only say that because it is very important to Putin's position domestically. He is in a very precarious place because it has not gone according to plan. I suspect that he was hoping that it would be a similar situation as it was in Crimea, where they pretty much just walked in. with very little resistance. But then they prepared Crimea for a long time. They were helping the rebel groups, the Russian-speaking groups, and they were developing them. And they built a corridor on the east side of Crimea, within which the Russians could cross the border very easily. That hasn't been the case in Ukraine. And so, depending on how it is viewed, the peace treaty that we hope will come, it depends on how it is viewed by the local domestic political scenario in Russia itself. That, whatever whatever action will be to put, will fix one of the variables in the geopolitical new world order. So we still have to wait to see what happens. I'm sure China is waiting with bated breath to see what's going to happen here. Tehran, I'm sure, as the professor mentioned, is clearly a player in this regard. And in the Middle East now, so far it has not affected the Middle East in any way so far. But maybe if it works out for Russia, if it works out for Vladimir Putin, China might be emboldened to make their own moves. Tehran might be emboldened to make their own moves. On the other hand, if it is very much a rejection of the idea of Putin of taking over a country, then perhaps that will also influence their thinking as to what can and cannot be done for their own interests. So yes, I don't think we can predict very closely, because we cannot. I hope to be as optimistic as the professor, but I don't see it happening in 2 weeks, to be perfectly honest. I hope it is. I hope it does, because the economic effects on every single person in the world has been enormous. And it is going to be enormous for a good long while. It's not going to go away anytime soon.
Sir, since we have a mutual defense treaty with the United States, that would affect, I'm sure that would play a role in how our country would position ourselves in this new geopolitical world order. So my question is, to what extent will you allow the United States influence your actual decision making in how you're going to craft the future foreign policy of the Philippines when that new world order has already taken shape?
Well, we have a very special relationship with the United States, and it's something that we have had and developed over 100 years, starting from being essentially a colony to a very strong partner here in this, especially in this part of the world, in the region. And that, I think, has been a good thing for both countries, both for the United States and for the Philippines. And that I think we can still depend on that. But the scenario that you spoke about, where we historically have always been with the United States, is still, I think, a carryover, a hangover of the Cold War. And we discussed it a little bit the last time. And I don't think the geopolitics of today are the same. And we now have to tread that very fine line to make sure that it's the Philippines, it's the Philippine interests that are the primacy of Philippine interests in anything. Now, in geopolitics, especially, we have another superpower 600 kilometers from our coastline, China. That puts, again, the Philippines in quite a precarious position. We're lucky because we're important geopolitically, even just we're strategically. We are unlucky because we are important geopolitically, and we've become a bit of a hot potato when it comes to that. So we definitely have to consider what is best always for the Philippines. And how do we achieve that? With our existing partnerships, alliances, as they stand now, what will be a new world order? Will it be a very big change? Will it be a small, slight change? Will it be a big change for Russia and a small change for everybody else? There are many moving parts to this thing, and it's not something that is easily definable. But I think once the peace agreement is made, we will study it very, very closely, and we will ask our best experts to determine what is the effect in these other countries. What is the effect to Tehran, to Iran? What's the effect? How does it change their thinking in Beijing? How does it change the thinking in Washington, D.C.? These are the big players. These are the people we have to deal with. So yes, it's not, I wish I could give you a categorical answer, but until we know exactly what that peace treaty will contain, it's very difficult, and to know what will happen after that in Russia. How will the power structure change? Will Putin be removed? Will he still maintain his position? All of these things are going to play a part in what it will look like after that peace agreement.
Senator, good evening. With this as a backdrop, the discussion with Russia, Ukraine, I was wondering if you can pivot to domestic concerns, particularly your energy policy.
Yeah.
Because as you said, the conflict is being felt worldwide, and among the things that we are seeing are sky-high fuel prices. But how would you address this? What would be your policies, particularly with energy security, going beyond this issue?
In the past week or so, since the war in Ukraine began, I have been espousing a policy of subsidizing all oil imports. Because the idea is that, yes, transport is the first sector that's going to be affected, but everyone will be affected. And therefore, if we are to support everyone, we have to subsidize all oil imports, in my view. However, I have been crunching the numbers. We can't do it. We cannot afford it. It's that simple. So we have to focus now. Maliwanag, yung mga transport group talagang naghihingalo dahil dito sa pagtaas ng presyo ng langis. Pero alam naman natin, pag tumaas ang presyo ng langis, sabay-sabay susunod na yung mga iba. So we have to focus in the sectors that will actually that will mitigate the effects of the oil price rise. Perhaps, well, there still exists the option of perhaps giving a tax holiday on the excise taxes to the oil for the oil imports. However, the pandemic is not over. We do not know what is going to happen next. When each time we thought tapos na, it came back. And I'm sure all of us after Christmas, after the Omicron hit at the end of January, sabi natin siguro baka tapos nito, baka wala na. But then we hear news now about Korea, about China, about Hong Kong, that they're locking down again. So we need those funds. Well, the government doesn't need the funds, people need the funds. And so we will still have to continue to collect as much as we can in preparation for any possible occurrence in terms of the pandemic. Baka may bagong strain, baka may babalik. But I don't think we will ever return to a time of lockdown anymore.
Senator, just before we go on the break, I was wondering if you can clarify your position on the oil price stabilization fund, because there's been some talk in social media to report, and I don't know if you are. Of course, the appeal is that there will be subsidy when prices are high.
Yes.
But the downside is that prices will remain high because when global prices dip.
Yeah.
And there's the argument, of course, that the market is always more efficient in determining prices. Could you clarify your position?
No, I think it is not to change the price of the oil. It's to change the rate of change. It is to try and mitigate the rate of change. So that, let's say, if the price increase is from Sunday to Monday, instead of increasing the full, let's say we're going to increase by, I don't know, 5 pesos, let's say. Instead of doing it all in one shot, we do it slowly because we have a stabilization fund. There is no way to bring the price of oil down from the Philippines. We are at the mercy of the oil producers. We in the Philippines, if I'm not mistaken, are 0.07% of the fossil fuel market, and therefore have very little influence on pricing. And we produce very little in terms of oil production. Malampaya is about, they say will dry up in the next 2 or 3 years. So yes, it is a very, very big problem. But the OPSF that I proposed is really to lessen the impact. And instead of making the impact instantaneous, we will try to make it happen over a longer time to give businessmen, consumers more time to adjust and to plan for the new regime of oil prices and oil products that would come to the Philippines.
Senador, kung may time pa?
We'll have to take a short break for now. Yes.
It's okay.
Sorry, Rolex.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've become the symbol of the human time clock. But the panel will still have a lot of questions for you, Senator Marcos. Unfortunately, we have to interrupt for a short break. So to everyone watching, don't go away. The Deep Probe SMNI presidential interviews will be right back.
Matatamis na mga pangako, marami sa atin na nagpaloko. Kaya't kung nais mo na magbabago, simulan mo na sa iyong sarili mismo.
Kaya't ngayong darating na pilihan, mag-isip ng di na malinlang. Kalayaan sa pagboto ay panindigan.
Kinabukasan natin ang nakasalalay dyan.
Ituloy ang pagbabago. Ikaw ang takbo, ang tanging susi nito. Ituloy ang pagbabago. Pag-asa ay siyang namatang mo. Sa tulong ng ating pagkakaisa, ang nasang pag-ulay sigurad mo nagagawa. Kaya't kung nais mo ng pagbabago, simulan mo na sa iyong sarili mismo. Kaya't ngayong darating na pilihan, mag-isip ng di na malinlang. Kalayaan sa pagboto ay panindigan.
Kinabukasan natin ang nakasalalay dyan.
Ituloy ang pagbabago. Ikaw ang takbo, ang tanging susi nito. Ituloy ang pagbabago. Pag-asa ay siyang namatang mo.
Ituloy ang pagbabago. Ituloy ang pagbabago. Pagpili ang iyong boto sa halagang 500 piso. Katumpasan ba ng ilang sentimo ang digdigan mo? Politikong taliwas, kaban ng bayan na iwawadas. Kaya't maging mapanuri sa was mong pagpili. Huwag sayangin ang kita sa daliri. Maging responsable sa pagpili. magkaisa at magtulungan.
Kakayahan mong magpasyang magiging gabay sa pag-asenso ng bansa sa'yo magsisimula.
Gabay para sa tamang pagpili ngayong eleksyon, hatid namin sa inyo itong mga leksyon.
Sino ang dapat na magpatuloy sa pagbabagong nasimulan? Sino ang dapat na mailukno sa kapangyarihan?
Dapat may paninindigang ipagpatuloy ang laban kontra insurhensya at iligal na droga.
Matapang, ngunit may puso, may malasakit, handang magpatawad, tagapagtaguyod ng kapayapaan at pagkakaisa.
Handang isakripisyo ang meron siya, mapunan lang ang kakulangan ng iba. Ang pulso ng taong bayan, nasa sa kanya.
Mautak, madiskarte at alam ang saklaw ng batas. May konkretong solusyon sa bawat problema, lalo na sa gitna ng krisis at pandemya.
Kilalanin mo ang iyong iboboto. Aralin ang plataforma. Paano ito isa?
Nagbabalik po tayo sa The Deep Probe, the SMNI Presidential Candidates Interview. And right before the break, the conversation between presidential candidate Senator Marcos and the panelists was spanning several issues, including the geopolitical conflicts and the oil price crisis. Now we will resume the questions from the panels.
Magandang gabi po, Senator.
Good evening, Rolex.
Ang katanungan ko po ay tungkol sa power. Alam niyo po yung IPIRA, hinati yung bansa natin. Electric Power Reforms Industry Act, IPIRA. Ngayon po, ganito. Recently, ang Malacanang po ay naglabas. Pinirmahan ng Pangulo, Executive Order 164, adding nuclear power to the energy mix. And among others, to study the viability kung pwede pa natin i-operate yung BNPP at ang iba pang mga facilities para sa paggamit ng nuclear energy. Pwede mo malaman kung ano yung isip nyo po tungkol dito? Kasi po mangyayari sa sunod na termino, ang 18 milestones. Ito po yung unang hakbang lamang.
Marami talagang pinag-uusapan. Energy is hard. Ito, aaminin ko sa inyo, talagang pinag-aaralan ko, napakahirap ayusin. Dahil nga, yung ating sistema, the IPIRA law, marami talaga nakakontain dyan na kailangan pag-aralan ulit. Because ang reklamo sa buong bansa, both na consumers lamang at saka yung mga negosyante. Kasi lagi natin napapag-usapan mga foreign investors na nagre-reklamo sa power, pati local investors. Kaya ang investment sa Pilipinas is not capital intensive. Yung mga investment sa Pilipinas short term lang, kuminsan hot money lang ang pumapasok, pasok-labas lang yan. It doesn't build anything. So that is it. It is a major problem. At kung titignan natin ang mga projection, sa pangyayari. Ngayon, just as a perfect example, narinig na siguro naman ng lahat, na sinasabi na baka sa eleksyon magkakaroon ng brownout. Kaya dahil nasa gitna na tayo ng summer, ng tag-araw. Kaya yan ang maliwanag na maliwanag, kulang na talaga ang power supply doon sa ating requirements. At saka yung idadagdag pa dapat natin para makapag-industrialize tayo ng mabuti. Kaya it's something that has to be attended to. In other words, kailangan natin lahat. Kailangan natin lahat ng makuha natin na power sources para mabigyan tayo ng mas mura at mas malawak at mas reliable na power supply. Ngayon, maaari nating i-expand yung ating hydro, expand natin yung ating geothermal, but there's a very simple idea when it comes to the energy sector. It's something called the base load. The base load is the load that never goes away. Just the demand that never goes away. Kahit gabi, kahit araw, ito na yung mga planta na nagpapatakbo. So that base load has to be satisfied. Kaya kung hindi umiihip ang hangin, paano yung wind power? Kung gabi, paano yung solar power? Kailangan pa rin ng traditional. Ngayon, doon tayo mamimili. Although it's not traditional for the Philippines, nuclear power is already considered a traditional power source. So it has to be looked into. Yung sa BNPP, nag-offer na because if you, ang Korea has, I believe, 5 sister plants to the Westinghouse plant in BNPP. And they have offered, I always say it's ironic that the names of their plants are Core 1, Core 2, Core 3, Core 4, Core 5. Pero hindi tayo nagkaroon kahit isa. But they have offered to come with their technical people, and they have offered to come to give us an idea. Pwede pa ba ito? Because kahit pa paano, the BNPP, the Bataan Nuclear Power Plant, was supposed to go online with 650 megawatts in 1986. That's a long time ago. Marami ng bagong technologies, marami ng bagong requirements. So we'll see. We have to. I think we should be open to our Korean friends to come and to tell us if this is still viable or you have to do something else. When it comes to nuclear power as an idea, well, let's just follow the science. Because dito naging political sa Pilipinas. It's also political in other places. But in our particular case, the reason we have no power plant, nuclear power plant at all is pure politics. Did not really follow the science. So we have to look into it. Because, even after Fukushima, when everybody was saying nuclear power is we have to rethink, kailangan natin pag-aralan ulit yan, mukhang delikado. Walang nagbago ng kanilang pagplano na pagpatayo ng nuclear power plant kahit saan. America tuloy-tuloy pa rin. Sa France, the majority of their power is already created by nuclear power. So in the other countries, ganun din. So I still think that it's something we should examine. There are many new technologies. One of the ones that we keep reading about are the modular nuclear power plant. They start with a small one. Gusto mong palakihin, bumili ka ulit ng module, ikakabit mo rin palaki mo ng palaki hanggat gusto mo. Siguro naman kaya natin patakbuhin ang nuclear power plant. Wala naman, there's no reason na bakit hindi kaya ng Pilipino na magpatakbo ng nuclear power plant. So, it's something that should be part of the mix. Kasama diyan is COP26, where we decided to cut down on coal-fired power generation. And what happened, nagtaasan ng presyo kasi walang kapalit sa renewable. Ibig sabihin, yung mix ng renewable at saka traditional, kailangan talaga natin, we have to decide once and for all, what is the mix that is good for the Philippines. I think it's not going to be a static point. I think as years go on, and we develop renewables, we develop other sources of power, that mix is going to slowly shift towards renewables, hopefully, because that's what we want because of climate change. But Nonetheless, that mix is still something that's up in the air that we haven't really determined what is proper and appropriate for the Philippine setting. But to make a short answer to your question, is that lahat kailangan natin. Kailangan natin palaki ng hydroelectric, kailangan natin palakihin yung geothermal, kailangan natin paramihan ng mga power plant, kailangan natin tumingin sa mga bagong technologies, wind farm, solar, kailangan natin tingnan ng nuclear. At kung kailangan talaga, di balikan natin oil-fired. But oil-fired has become less and less attractive because of what's happening in the volatility of oil prices, especially in the last 2-3 years. Then with this new development in Ukraine, talagang kailangan pag-isip-isipan natin ng mabuti. Kasi baka maipit tayo, pag tumaas na naman yan, hindi natin maipatakbo yung planta natin, balik na naman tayo sa dati, nasa brownout na naman tayo. Now we have lots of coal here in the Philippines. The Chinese claim to have good enough technology. I've actually visited one of their coal-fired plants that na malinis na, that they're able to extract the carbon and they're able to dispose of the carbon properly. So all of these things we need to look into. Lahat yan kailangan natin.
Well, after the generating companies, meron po tayong Transco. Marami reklamo sa Transco. Senador, open ba kayo sa idea na katulad ng tubig, may west sector operator, may east sector operator, chachap-chap natin ang Transco?
I don't think so. May economies of scale yan eh. Ang business model ng high tension na delivery na ginagamit ng Transco is the same as a tollway. You maintain the tollway, you collect toll, and that's how you pay for what you build. That's the same thing that Transco should be doing. Yun lamang, siguro hindi sapat. Sa amin lang, marami kaming pangangailangan dyan sa Transco. We were hoping to build a high-tension cable from Ilocos Norte to directly export the power we are producing via windmills directly to Manila because that's where the demand is. And it's more profitable for us. But hanggang ngayon, hindi pa nangyayari. And I'm not sure, I'm not privy to the board meetings and the discussions going on in Transco. So I do not know quite why wala pa yan. But yes, it really should be a simple print na kaya madali lang naman patakbuhin dapat yan. Kaya pag-aralan natin kung bakit nagkakaganon. You mentioned EPIRA. We have to look back at EPIRA. I think EPIRA might already have at least certain provisions in EPIRA are already obsolete. As a matter of fact.
Senator?
Yes.
I hope you don't mind. I'd like to switch topics a little bit because we have a short period to ask so many issues.
All right.
I'd like to ask about agriculture because you've mentioned that in the last time you were here. One of the biggest problems that the sector is facing is the aging of farmers.
Yes.
One study I've read said that their average age is between 57 and 59. And the worst thing is their children don't want to go into agriculture. And this observation is supported by declining enrollment in agricultural programs of SUCs across the nation. And last, the Secretary of Agriculture last year said that we may be facing a critical shortage of farmers in as little as 12 years. And he said this last year. So maybe you'd like to share with us what your plans are regarding this issue.
Regarding the age of farmers getting older, not only are they discouraged to come in, their parents who are farmers, they say, wag na kayong pumasok dito, napakahirap ng buhay dito. Mag-aral kayo, pumunta kayo sa Manila, pumunta kayo sa city, dyan kayo magpagaling para hindi niyo na kailangan daanan itong dinadaanan namin. That's the state of the agriculture in the Philippines today. As a general rule, as a general concept, I think we have to really shift already from what is essentially still mom and pop operation and talk about agribusiness.
and talk about the industry of agriculture. And there are many things that we need to do to achieve that, to get to that point. See, let's go back to the issue of the age of our farmers and the young people who are not going into agriculture. If it is an agribusiness, if it is not the traditional farming method that we are always going through, that we have been doing for the last millennia, but move into something that is more high-tech, then that will necessarily need for the entry into more technically minded agribusiness practitioners. And that will bring the age younger immediately. I know already for myself, young people in their 30s who have discovered some new technology or have come across a new thing. Bagay sa atin to, gawin natin. And they do, and they have brought all kinds of new techniques to farming, but it's not yet extensive because there are no encouragements coming from government in terms of tax breaks, in terms of I don't really believe in subsidies in that regard, but I still think that we can improve the attractiveness of the agricultural sector to younger people if we use the most modern, most interesting technology. And the kids say they can geek it out, right? They'll just pag-aralan nila na mabuti. That's a very interesting. It will become a very interesting line of work.
Is there an important role for government to play? Because if you look at the public spending on agriculture in the Philippines, it's only about 1.7% of the national budget, far below what is being spent in other ASEAN countries.
Yes. It's been that, and it has been that way for a long time. I think we have really neglected agriculture because we had a system set up where the entire value chain was attended to by government. And of course, the private sector practitioners come into the picture during the trading and in the market. But that was dismantled in 1986 and has not been a replacement for it. So we have to do it again. And if we look at the countries that we are competing with in terms of rice production, for example, they're Thailand and Vietnam, the obvious ones. Their cost of production is lower. The labor, segment of their production cost is 1/2 of ours. And that's due to mechanization. We have not mechanized at all. It's going to take, it's not a simple thing because we have to organize now to be able to mechanize properly, to use the big machines, the big tractors, the big harvesters. Yung nakikita natin sa ibang bansa na ginagamit na kalaki-laki, na ang bilis-bilis, siguro sa isang araw, ilang hektarya na nakocover nila. Pero ang average na land holding dito sa Pilipinas is less than 1 hectare. So hindi mo magamit yung mga ganung klaseng makina. So the way to do it, or the way we did it in Ilocos, was we organized the cooperatives. And in that way, we were able to take full advantage of economies of scale. And I think that's what we need to do here in the Philippines now. But there are other things that need to be done as well. I think the fact that we are importing galunggong has been made very, very public. It's been very, very clear that it is quite a surprise for us to get into that situation. But again, it really comes from a neglect and the agricultural sector. So the things we have to do the research and development for the new varieties, for the new yung nag-aalaga ng hayop, paano yung gagawin yung pagkalat ng mga inahin. Again, these are different schemes that we have to put together. In our fisheries, there is a very, very good potential for us kung ayusin lang natin ang ating kinukuhanan ng isda. Number one, bigyan natin yung mga mangingisda na mas malaking bangka. Maliliit lang yung bangka nila eh. And they have to go out already 12 kilometers kasi overfish na dito sa loob. And then, of course, patrol so that maraming nagpo-poach sa atin. So we have to have all the best techniques and technologies for our farmers and for our fishermen, fisher folk. So that's just the beginning of it. And then the support. Now, one of the biggest problems that the agricultural industry is facing right now in terms of crops is urea is 2,500 pesos now. And we know of many areas where farmers just didn't plant. And that kills our production. Taas na naman ang importation natin. Because kung minsan, kung kulang talaga. Kung pabayaan mo yan, tataas naman ang presyo, hindi na kaya ng tao. Kaya talagang kailangan ayusin yung agrikultura. So you have to support, the government has to support that. This question of urea, for example, gobyerno lang bibili in bulk. Hundreds of tons of urea, and then isama na yan sa production loan bago planting season. Magbibigay ka ng production loan sa farmer. Yung iba pera, yung iba seedlings, yung iba abono, the fertilizer, at saka yung pesticide. And then you could support them with new techniques, the techno demos, to teach them what are the new plants, what are the new techniques, how you can save water, how you can save on the other inputs, etc., etc. And then the processing. You know, it should not really be allowed anymore. Dapat in the year 2022, dapat wala na tayong nakikitang palay na tinutuyo sa highway. Dahil dapat meron na tayong binigay. Yan, si Rolex knows this well from because sa local talagang yun ang problema eh. So, tapos yung mga milling, dapat talaga meron tayong milling na small scale, large scale, depending on what everyone. So the value stays with the farmer. Hindi pumupunta sa trader na may malaking milling na planta. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the traders. They have a part to play. But let's keep as much of the value added and give it back to the farmer. And then, if we are able to do that, gumanda ang ating production, mumura ang ating production cost, we can directly sell it. And the kadiwa is the example that we always use. We can sell it to the public at a lower price, assuming the government will not make a profit, because the government should not make a profit. So they should be able to sell these basic agricultural products for less.
Mr. Marcos,
Yes,
we all know that your campaign's theme is unity.
Mm-hmm.
And recently you made a statement on an issue that, would test your call for unity, because this issue is really polarizing in our country. And I'm referring to your statement on LGBTQ rights. And so my question is, there are a lot of interests that had to be balanced here, especially that even though that we are a secular country, our people, around 80% of our people have really, really strong religious beliefs. And these two things, are always contrary to each other. So my question is, how will you balance the legitimate aim of protecting the rights and welfare of LGBTQ people, while at the same time respecting the legitimate interests of religious groups that they can freely pursue their belief on this matter?
I don't think LGBTQ issues are polarizing in the Philippines, honestly. I think we are much more open-minded about it, considering the fact that we are in fact a very Roman Catholic country. But then you must, and so that I don't think it's polarizing at all. I think Filipinos are, I don't know how to put it, but we're much cooler than most other places when it comes to these things. And I think when I talk to the members of that community, wala namang hinihingi na special treatment ang mga LGBTQ. Wag lang, do not discriminate against us. Yun lang naman yun eh. We don't want a special program for you, for ourselves. You have to want to, do something. Just patas lang. patas na, pare-pareho lang. Na kahit LGBTQ kami, kahit matanda kami, kahit come from the wrong place, I don't know, whatever. All forms of discrimination are some things that we have to guard against because that's corrosive. That just gets in the way. It doesn't help. It doesn't help anything. So that, I think, is the approach to LGBTQ issues: is just fight discrimination every step of the way. There's a pool of talent in every sector of our society that we need to take advantage of, and so we cannot exclude any part and say, hindi pwede yan, hindi na ayaw namin sa ganyan. And let me get to the point. I mean, LGBTQ, Roman Catholic, you will say that it's wrong. What did the Pope say when he was asked about same-sex marriage, same-sex union? Let me correct myself, same-sex union. And I think the Pope said it perfectly. Who am I to judge? And that's the attitude that all of us should have. And with that, I think we'll go down the correct place. We will go down the right path.
Yeah, I think this
Sorry,
will be...
Professor Carlos, I know that you warned me about senior citizens losing their train of thought, but I have been instructed to go on a commercial break. So
we have
we'll
to go on
start
break?
off. Yes,
Yeah.
we'll start the next round with your question.
Okay.
I promise that. Yeah. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you, everyone. We have more questions coming from our panel. So don't go away. The Deep Probe SMNI presidential candidates interview will be right back.
Gabay para sa tamang pagpili ngayong eleksyon, hatid namin sa inyo itong mga leksyon.
Sino ang dapat na magpatuloy sa pagbabagong nasimulan? Sino ang dapat na mailukno sa kapangyarihan?
Dapat may paninindigang ipagpatuloy ang laban kontra insurhensya at iligal na droga.
Matapang, ngunit may puso, may malasakit, handang magpatawad, tagapagtaguyod ng kapayapaan at pagkakaisa.
Handang isakripisyo ang meron siya, mapunan lang ang kakulangan ng iba. Ang pulso ng taong bayan, nasa sa kanya.
Mautak, madiskarte at alam ang saklaw ng batas. May konkretong solusyon sa bawat problema, lalo na sa gitna ng krisis at pandemya.
Kilalanin mo ang iyong iboboto. Aralin ang plataforma. Paano ito isa sa katuparan at patatagalin? Suriin ang track record.
Sawa na tayo sa puro forma at salita. Ang kailangan natin ang magpapatuloy sa pagbabagong natatamasa ng sambayan ng Pilipino.
May malakas na paninindigan sa tama, hindi magtataksil sa bayan at hindi tayo ipagpapalit sa kahit anuman.
Matapat at hindi magnanakaw, hindi sarili, kundi ang interes ng bayan ang inuuna.
May political will, totoo ang serbisyo at handang ibigay ang lahat. Matugunan lamang ang mga isyu na kinakaharap at kakaharapin pa ng bansa.
Bilang botante, nasa atin ang responsibilidad na ihalal ang nararapat. Isa itong desisyon para sa nakararami kung kaya't pag-isipang mabuti.
Huwag magpadala sa kasikatan at sabi-sabi. Ikaw mismo ang kumilatis.
Tandaan, nakasalalay sa desisyon mo ang magiging kinabukasan ng bansa. Kaya, maging matalino.
Maliban sa totoo, dapat may karanasan at kapasidad na mamuno.
Hindi ka mabibili, kaya huwag kang magpapabayad. Bigyang dangal ang iyong boto.
Katuwang nyo ang SMNI sa isang malinis at patas na eleksyon. Dahil dito, siguradong balitang totoo.
Ibibigay namin sa inyo mga impormasyong tama. Tuloy ang pagbabago kahit sa pagbabalita.
Sama-sama po tayo tungo sa bagong bansa. Piliin ang magpapatuloy sa mga programang nasimulan ng administrasyon.
Ituloy.
Ituloy.
Ituloy. Ituloy. Ituloy. Ituloy. Ituloy.
Ituloy.
Ituloy.
Ituloy. Ituloy. Ituloy ang pagbabago.
Maraming beses na tayong nasaktan, binigo, nalagay sa alanganin. Minsan nang nagdalawang isip kung itutuloy pa ba natin ang nasimulang laban. Dahil tao tayo, madalas nagkakamali, nagbabago, nangangarap, natatalo, nagtatagumpay. Iba-iba ang paniniwala, kaya madalas may mga di pagkakaintindihan. Sa panahon ng pangangailangan, lumalabas ang totoong tayo. Mapagmahal, puno ng malasakit, nabubuo, mas humihigpit ang kapit natin sa bawat isa. Dahil alam natin na kung sabay, lahat nagiging posible.
Sa muling pagsikat ng araw, isang desisyon ang kailangan mong pakawalan. Desisyon hindi lamang para sa iyong sarili, kundi para sa iyong minamahal. Desisyon para sa katrabaho, kapitbahay, sa iyong kaibigan, at maging sa iba, sa hindi mo.
We're back with a deep probe, the SMNI presidential candidates interview. And again, 1 hour went by so quickly. So we're down to the last question for our last candidate for the evening. To start off with our last question, Professor Carlos.
Okay, there is, I know, Mr. Marcos, that...
Professor Carlos, I know you're gonna love me for this. You're wearing your sunglasses again.
Sorry again. Ay, mag-forgive na kayo, ha? You will all be 75 also. Unless you die young. Hello. Humirit pa yan. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a sense that this will be the last time I shall interact with you in a venue like this. So, let me introduce something which I have tested in my class on elites in politics. And this involves moving into an area called predicting leadership decision-making. So I hope you don't mind if I give you 3 short questions, but they are related to each other. And it will give our people a chance to know you in terms of your leadership style. The first question is, do you think that you're basically an optimist rather than a pessimist? Number 2, do you think you are basically a high-risk taker rather than a low-risk taker? You'll notice the 2 are related. And the third question is, do you think you are Machiavellian?
Well, the first question is if I'm an optimist or a pessimist. I'm essentially an optimist. And the reason I'm essentially an optimist, because especially when we talk about the country, we are optimistic. I am optimistic because our biggest asset is the Filipino people, and it's not. I try to be very objective about it, ma'am. I have traveled all over the world. I have not met a better people than Filipinos, and every possible. Am I a risk taker or not? When it comes to national issues, I am tend towards the conservative only because a mistake will cost so much suffering to so many people. In other words, you have to be very careful with the decisions you make. And it's not something that you do offhand. You think about it very hard. You talk to as many people as you can. And you make absolutely certain that you have done everything that you can possibly do to make whatever your plan is, to make it work. Am I Machiavellian? Well, I've studied him quite thoroughly. And I know very many Machiavellians in my life. But
Is it Machiavelli in terms of taking every means to produce an end, not the other Machiavellian, the bad Machiavellian?
Well, certainly, we have to be aware of everything that is going to help whatever it is that you are hoping to achieve. And on a national scale, that means you have to understand very well what the situation is on the ground. Ganito kasi at sitwasyon ng mga tao, eto na ngayon sila. Nasa gitna pa ng pandemya, walang trabaho yung mga yan. Umaasa pa rin yan sa tupad, sa IX, etc. O paano tayo lalabas niyan? Where will what are the other countries doing? Kailangan maging maingat so I suppose in the same sense, as you say, that these questions were related, it's a way of being careful and being very, very knowledgeable about what are the things that have to come into play so that you will achieve success, whatever that success, define that success. So in that sense, yes, ma'am, I am a Machiavellian.
Yeah, thank you. In future, if you have time, please come to the university and I will discuss with you. It's called the Operational Code Construct. Thank you very much.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So sorry, I know we were getting requests for extension, but we want to be strict about keeping it to 1 hour for all the presidential candidates. So, Senator Marcos, you have the floor for your closing remarks.
Well, first of all, I thank again our panelists and SMNI for this opportunity to speak on the many issues that have yet to be explored. And the format as well, I think, is quite constructive. So thank you to SMNI for that. Thank you to our panelists here. I hope to continue to lay out what programs that form a part of the platform, the planks of the platform, for the possibility for the next administration, for the possibilities for the next administration. And that's why such opportunities such as this are very, very important. And I hope that we have been able to impart some of the ideas that I'm examining and trying to put together to bring to the next administration should I be elected to the presidency. So we hope that we continue with this discussion. I hope that people come and think about it. And if they have any ideas, please come and tell us because we need to hear from everyone. We need everyone. That is the cry of the unity team, is that we cannot say that anyone is not needed. Everyone is needed in this effort that we are trying to do to get through the pandemic, to recover our economy from the problems that the pandemic has brought, and to position the Philippines to face the new world order and what will happen in the next few years. So thank you all very much, and thank you for the opportunity. Magandang gabi po sa inyo.
Maraming salamat po, Senator Bongbong Marcos, and maraming salamat to all our panelists. Sa pamamagitan ng SMNI Deep Probe, sinubok namin na dalhin sa ibang level ang pagkilatis sa ating mga presidential candidates. After all, the presidential post is the highest position of leadership in our country. Napakahalagang desisyon ang pagpili natin ng susunod na Pangulo ng ating bansa. We hope that today's Deep Probe gave people an opportunity to further scrutinize our candidates. Thank you to all our candidates who joined us today. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to get to know you more. And of course, thank you to the panelists for sharing your expertise. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Ito pong natunghayan ang The Deep Probe, the SMNI Presidential Candidates Interview. Sa Mayo 9, muling pagtitibayin nating mga Pilipino ang kapangyarihang pumili ng susunod na mga lingkod ng bayan.
Silang magpapatuloy ng pagsusulong ng pagbabago sa ating bansa. Silang makakakuha ng tiwala ng taong bayan.
Sa muli, maraming salamat po sa aming pinakamamahal na Honorary Chairman, Reverend Dr. Pastor Apollo C. Kibuloy, sa pagkakataong maging kabahagi ng pagbibigay serbisyo sa ating mga kababayan sa pamamagitan ng paghahatid ng ganitong uri ng programa. Ako po si MJ Mondiha.
At of course, sa ating mga kandidatong dumalo ngayong gabi, maraming salamat sa pagtanggap ng hamon ng The Deep Probe at ganun din sa ating mga kababayan na patuloy na sumusuporta sa SMNI. Ako si Ruth Hamilton. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas nating mahal!
Matatamis na mga pangako, marami sa atin nagpaloko. Kaya't kung nais mo na ang pagbabago, simulan mo na sa iyong sarili mismo. Kaya't ngayong darating na pilihan, mag-isip ng di na malinlang. Kalayaan sa pagboto ay panindigan. Kinabukasan natin ang nakasalalay dyan. Ituloy ang pagbabago, ikaw at ako ang tanging susi nito. Ituloy ang pagbabago, pag-asa at siyang naman. Sa tulong ng ating pagkakaisa, ang nasang pag-ulay siguradong magagawa. Kaya't kung nais mo ng pagbabago, simulan mo na sa iyong sarili mismo. Kaya't ngayong darating na pilihan, mag-isip ng di na malinlang. Kalayaan sa pagboto ay panindigan. Kinabukasan natin ang nakasalalay dyan. Ituloy ang pagbabago, ikaw at ako ang tanging susi nito. Ituloy ang pagbabago, pag-asa at siyang naman. Ituloy ang pagbabago. Ituloy ang pagbabago. Pagpili ang iyong boto sa halagang 500 piso. Katumbas sa ilang sentimo ang didigan mo.
bayan na iwawadas. Kaya't maging mapanuri sa huwag mong pagpiling. Huwag sayangin kung kita sa daliri. Maging responsable sa pagpili, magkaisa at magtulungan.
Kakayahan mong magpasyang magiging gabay sa pag-asenso ng bansa sa iyong